It started 3 weeks after I moved into the house. I'd been drawn to the place because of its charm. The creaky hardwood floors, the stained glass windows, the clawfoot tub in the bathroom. But the first night I heard the whispers, I almost packed my bags and left. It was around 2 a.m. I'd been reading in bed when I heard it. A low, murmuring voice, like someone talking just out of earshot. I froze. My cat, Miso, perked up his ears and stared at the wall. I told myself it was the pipes, or maybe a neighbor's TV. But the next night, it happened again. This time, the whispers were clearer. They were coming from the hallway. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound. The voice seemed to trail off as I approached, but when I reached the end of the hall, I noticed something odd. The wallpaper there was peeling, and underneath, the wall was covered in tiny scratches, hundreds of them, like someone had dragged a knife across the plaster over and over. But that wasn't the worst part. Carved into the wall, in jagged letters, were the words, "She's still here." I called my dad the next morning. He's a contractor, so I asked him to check the house for structural issues. While he was inspecting the walls, he found a hidden compartment behind the living room fireplace. Inside was a journal, its pages brittle and yellowed. The entries were from a woman named Eleanor, who'd lived in the house in the 1940s. She wrote about her husband's abuse, her isolation, and her growing paranoia that the house was alive. The final entry read, "I can't make them stop. The walls are hungry." That night, the whispers turned into screams. I bolted awake to the sound of a woman wailing, a guttural, inhuman noise that seemed to come from inside the walls. Miso was hissing at the closet, and when I flipped on the light, the door began rattling violently. I threw my weight against it to keep it shut, but something was pushing back. Cold air seeped through the cracks, and the smell of burnt hair filled the room. I moved out the next day. The realtor said the house had been renovated months earlier, but when I checked the city records, there was no permit for construction. The neighbors told me a woman had died there decades ago, but no one knew her name. I still have nightmares about the walls breathing. I've never believed in ghosts, not until last winter. I'd been working late, as usual, and stumbled into my apartment around 1 a.m. The place was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I poured myself a drink and glanced at the mirror in the hallway, a cheap, full-length thing I'd picked up at IKEA. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement behind my reflection, a shadow, tall and spindly, darting just out of view. I spun around. Nothing. The room was empty. Over the next few weeks, the shadow appeared more often. Sometimes it was in the mirror, sometimes in the window across the street. It never had a face, just a vague outline, like a person-shaped void. I started leaving the lights on all night. It didn't help. One evening, I came home to find my apartment trashed. Drawers were overturned, books scattered, but nothing was missing. The mirror was shattered. In the center of the glass, written in what looked like black paint, was the word "mine." I called the cops, but they wrote it off as a break-in. Probably junkies, the officer said, but I knew better. The final incident happened on a Sunday. I'd been arguing with my ex over the phone and slammed the receiver down. When I looked up, the shadow was in the mirror again, but this time, it was inside the room with me. It lunged, and I felt a searing pain across my chest, like claws raking my skin. I blacked out. When I came to, I was on the floor. The mirror was intact, but my chest bore 3 long parallel scratches. They still haven't healed. I sold the apartment and moved to a studio with no mirrors. But sometimes, in the dark, I see the shadow flicker in the glass of my microwave, my phone screen, My TV. It's patient. It's waiting. The cottage was perfect, quaint, affordable, and miles from campus. My roommates had bailed on me last minute, so I took it alone. The landlord warned me the plumbing was finicky, but that was it. The first sign something was wrong? My coffee maker turned on by itself. I'd wake up to the smell of burnt coffee and find the machine steaming, even though I'd unplugged it the night before. Then my books started rearranging themselves. Stephen King novels stacked on top of my chemistry textbooks. My favorite sweater folded and placed in the fridge. I set up cameras. The footage showed nothing, just empty rooms. But the disturbances got worse. One night, I heard footsteps pacing the hallway. I grabbed a kitchen knife and followed the sound. The footsteps stopped at the bathroom door. I pushed it open and the sink faucet blasted on full force, spraying water everywhere. The mirror fogged up, and a handprint slowly formed on the glass. A child's handprint. I called my mom, sobbing. She told me to sage the house. I did, but it didn't work. The next day, I found a note tucked under my pillow. Play with me. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my car and drove to my sister's place. When I told her the story, she went pale. That cottage, she said, was where the Andersons lived. Their daughter drowned in the lake out back in the 80s. They say she haunts the property. I never went back. The landlord said the cottage cleaned itself out after I left. My cameras? All the memory cards were erased, but the handprint is still on my mirror. It reappears every winter. The house was a steel, a crumbling Victorian split into 4 units. My third-floor apartment had a turret with a view of the Mississippi. I loved it, despite the draftiness. Then the cold spots started. It wasn't the usual chill. This was a bone-deep cold that made my teeth ache. It always centered in the turret room, even with the heater blasting. I'd wake up to find frost on the windows in July. One night, I heard a child laughing. It echoed through the halls, high-pitched and playful. I followed the sound to the turret and found the door locked. From the other side, a voice giggled, "You can't come in." I called the landlord. He admitted the house had a history. A young boy had died there in the 1900s, trapped in a hidden room during a fire. The room was sealed off, but no one knew where. The final straw was the smell. Rotting meat, sudden and overwhelming. It came from the turret. I broke down the door. Inside was a small, windowless room, its walls blackened by smoke. On the floor lay a charred wooden soldier, its face melted. I moved out that week. The landlord said the smell was probably raccoons. But the new tenants? They heard the laughter too. Now, when I walk past the house, I see a shadow in the turret window. It waves. It started with the flickering lights. I'd just moved into a studio apartment in a converted Victorian house. The landlord warned me the wiring was quirky, but I didn't care. Rent was cheap, and I needed silence to write. The first week was fine. Then, around 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, my desk lamp began flickering. I sighed, thinking the bulb was dying. But when I stood to fix it, the room went pitch black. My phone died too, no battery, no signal. That's when I heard it. A low, wet gurgle from the bathroom. I froze. The sound wasn't human. It was like someone dragging a sack of wet leaves across the floor. My brain screamed, "Run," but my legs wouldn't move. The gurgle grew louder, closer. I grabbed a kitchen knife and backed into the corner. The bathroom door creaked open. No one was there. But the air turned icy. My breath fogged. Then the mirror over my dresser cracked with a gunshot sound. Shards fell, and in the broken glass, I saw a reflection that wasn't mine. A hunched figure with 2 long arms, its head twisted sideways. I bolted for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. The gurgle was behind me now. I kicked the door until my foot went numb, then rammed it with my shoulder. It flew open, and I stumbled into the hallway. The landlord found me at 6 a.m., shivering on his porch. He said the building was condemned in the 80s after a tenant drowned in the bathtub. I moved out that day. The new tenant lasted 3 nights. They say she left a note. It's still hungry. I worked nights, so I'd sleep till noon. One morning, I woke to a knock at the door. Through the peephole, I saw a guy in a UPS uniform holding a small box. No return address. I signed for it, thinking it was a gift from my sister. Inside was a vintage Polaroid camera and a note. Take a picture of the couch. Weird, but I humored it. I snapped a photo of my ugly thrift store sofa. The image developed instantly, and there was a woman sitting on it. Long black hair, pale skin, staring at the camera. I dropped the photo. My apartment was empty. I checked the couch, the closets, even under the bed. Nothing. But the photo was real. I tossed it in the trash. The next day, another knock. Same UPS guy, same box. This time the note read, "Why didn't you keep the first one?" The camera was inside again. I took another photo. This time, the woman was standing behind me in the reflection of my TV. My blood ran cold. I smashed the camera and burned the photos. The third delivery came at midnight. The box was heavier. Inside was a blood-stained shirt and a photo of me sleeping on the couch, taken from my own living room window. I called the police, but the UPS tracking number was fake. I moved out the next day. The last thing I saw in that apartment, a shadow in the window, watching me leave. After my husband died, I stayed in our farmhouse. It was isolated, but I loved the quiet. Then the phone calls started. At first, it was just heavy breathing. I hung up. Then a voice raspy, like sandpaper, whispered, "I'm coming over." I blocked the number. That night, the porch light flickered. I peeked through the curtains. A figure stood at the edge of the driveway, backlit by moonlight. Tall, wearing a long coat. It didn't move. I called the sheriff. They found no one there. The calls kept coming. I'm at the door. I checked nothing. I'm in the kitchen. Silence. Then, one night, the voice said, "I'm in your room." I froze. The closet door creaked open. No one there. But my husband's old robe, hanging inside, was damp, like someone had worn it in the rain. I stopped sleeping, ate with a knife in my lap. The final call came a week later. "You shouldn't have ignored me." The line went dead. At 3 a.m., the front door slammed. Footsteps walked down the hall. I hid in the bathroom, clutching a shotgun. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A hand, cold, wet, brushed under the doorframe. Then silence. The sheriff found muddy footprints leading from the door to the woods. No tracks leading back. They never found the caller. I sold the house. The new owners tore it down. They say the foundation is still there, overgrown, and sometimes, on rainy nights, you can hear a phone ringing in the woods. I was home alone, making dinner. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. I leaned out the kitchen window to smoke, a habit I'm not proud of. The fire escape was rusted, but I'd done it 100 times. This time, the railing broke. I fell. Not all the way. My arm caught on a ledge, but my leg twisted under me. I was dangling 30 feet above an alley. My phone was inside. No one knew I was there. The pain was blinding. I screamed until my voice cracked. Hours passed. The sun set. My fingers went numb. I thought about my roommate, Karen. She'd been out of town for days. No one would find me until Monday. Then I heard it. Footsteps in the alley. A homeless man, I thought. I screamed again. The footsteps stopped. A voice. Shut up. Not a vagrant. A man in a hoodie stood below me, filming with his phone. Help me, I begged. He laughed. Nah, this is too good. He recorded me for 20 minutes, my sobs, my pleas, then walked away. I blacked out. Woke up in the hospital. Karen found me when she got home. The doctors said I was lucky to survive. The man who filmed me? The police never found him. But 6 months later, a video surfaced online. Dude fails epically off-fire escape. It had 500,000 views. The comments called me a clown and a dumbass. I still can't feel my left hand. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear a laugh that sounds just like his.